That's a wrap.
Awesome. Good times.
Good afternoon and welcome back to Planet One. Greg Angello here with you on a beautiful spring day, April 25th, and we are just winding down the end of the month. And we've got a great guest. Stefani Boyd is going to be with us. We just mentioned this on the last podcast that we did. If you haven't checked that one out, we did one with Eric Allen, and we named it Living in My Own Private Idaho. And the reason I did that is because he talked about how he lives in his compound in Idaho. And that's why we named it that way. So check that out. A lot of great information about Allen. Comes all the way from Sacramento. I think she's in Sacramento, California, because she's on a different time zone over there. But Stefani Boyd is with us. And Stefani, it is great to have you here. Thanks for being with us on the planet. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Greg.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you reaching out to me and everyone out there who's listening. We're going to talk a little bit about you. We're going to talk about your life and many different ways that we can go on this one, because we know that you're in the real estate business as well, the mortgage business, and you also have a very interesting life. And so before we get started with some of the questions and things like that, so how long have you been doing podcasting now?
Let's see. It's been about a year and a half now that I've been in the podcast world.
And so do you enjoy doing this now as part of your other job? Is this something that you look forward to doing?
Yeah, it's fun. It's always a little bit anxiety building. There's even if I know there's going to be no video, there's a tiny bit of stage fright that creeps in, I suppose, if I'm being 100% honest. But at the same time, it is, it's fun. It's great to get a chance to engage with different people and explore new and old ideas and make new connections and everything. So,
Yeah, this
yeah,
is
I
sort of
guess.
like a platform that you've been using now, right? So we see a lot of people that are using podcasting platform to get either recognition or get their name out there about what they're doing or promoting something,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, also to build your Google algorithm, to drive traffic to your website, to make it so that when people search your name, like supposing I'm in my area promoting my real estate business and I just say, oh, just Google me. You'll see that I do a lot of stuff. So,
Right. So they'll see what podcasts and things like that you've been on. And
yeah. And then if they want to take a listen, they can hear what I'm all about and, go from there.
well, we really appreciate you coming in, and I'm excited to have you on. I know we had a great conversation about a week ago, and there's a lot of different ways we can talk to you about whatever's going on. But I think what's always good is to maybe start from kind of like from the beginning to some respect, so people get, like a foundation, a base about you. As I mentioned, you're from Sacramento, but tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what you were doing some years ago, and we can lead through there.
All right. Well, if we're going to go back to the very beginning, I always start out with this line, which is that I was born in a trailer in my granny's driveway. True story. My dad's family came from Oklahoma, fleeing the Dust Bowl in the, I don't know, my dad came out to California in the 60s, 70s after Vietnam, but uh, and then my mom's family came from Pennsylvania, and my parents were a couple of hippies after the Vietnam War. They met at College of the Siskiyous up at Mount Shasta. They joined a cult for a while called
Okay.
what it was Elizabeth Clare Prophet and the Church of the Universal Triumphant at the time. And now it's called Lighthouse Summit. And so they were free range hippies at that time, and they had a motorhome, and it was parked in my grandma's driveway. Not actually my granny, but I think it sounds funnier when I say it was in my granny's driveway. And they parked the motorhome in there, and my dad figured that since he had been a medic in Vietnam, he was fully qualified to deliver babies. And my auntie was just graduating nursing school, and she had enough experience there. She figured she was an expert at delivering babies as well. And so between the three of them, I suppose, they brought me into the world on a cold December night in the wee hours of the morning.
Mm.
So then my parents were kind of homesteaders. They bought a piece of property, built an A-frame on it. I was raised as a feral country kid, just running around. We had a pond and swing sets and all that stuff. So I grew up in the country. And then when my parents got divorced, we moved to the city. I decided my mom got into real estate. So I watched her figure out how to do the ins and outs of real estate. And then I kind of took an abrupt left turn and decided to become a teenage mom for a while. So I did that. But at the same time, I knew that I wasn't just going to become a statistic of teenage motherhood. I knew that I had to really take the bull by the horns, I guess you could say. So I graduated high school 2 years early, went straight over to my local city college, got a bunch of grants and student loans, and got a degree in criminal justice. And I went out to become the youngest criminal investigator that Sacramento County had ever had. And I was barely 21. And there was some good old boy network going on, a little hostility that such a young whippersnapper to come in there and uprooted the system.
Look out.
Yeah, there's competition for that job was like 25-year sheriff's detectives. And in fact, that was my union. I was in the sheriff's union because I was a criminal investigator, even though we were kind of the black sheep because we were representing the defense at the public defender's office. And most of those guys wanted to go work in the DA's office where you carry a badge and a gun. But I was never too interested in having a badge and a gun. I thought I'd be more comfortable fighting for the rights of the underdog. So I kind of always felt myself a champion of the underdogs. And so they put me right on 3 strikes and homicides, basically trying to get rid of me, or it was kind of a sink or swim type of test maybe. And instead of sinking, I swam famously. I made a lot of good friends with the lawyers in the office. We won a lot of cases. We had a lot of just interesting experiences that I certainly never would have had, people I never would have met, places I never would have found myself if I hadn't spent 5 years out in the field investigating murders and rapes and child molests and all kinds of other stuff. So I did get tired of that around about 2000. Got my real estate license that year, joined the family real estate brokerage, and we had a few good years of doing that until the subprime mortgage meltdown of 2008 was devastating in our office. The office downsized. Many people decided to go to massage school instead of playing real estate anymore, myself included. And so I got out of it for a few years. And 2015, I got my license back after doing massage, a little bit of goat farming, a little bit of homesteading. I kind of went back to my roots, moved back to the country for a little while.
Okay.
1 year I had 11 goat babies, and I fancied myself quite the goat farmer for those few years. And then, eventually I moved back to the city and got my own brokerage, my broker's license. So now I'm a loan and a real estate broker. And I just kind of run my little one-man shop here in Sacramento, helping first-time home buyers get into their first house is really my specialty. I like the underdogs. I like helping those people that maybe have a little rougher credit. Maybe they think they don't, maybe they think they're never going to realize the dream of home ownership, young couples. So I work
That's a
with
good
lot
point.
of people.
Yeah. Well, I want to touch a little bit upon that and the new thing that's coming out now with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. But before I go there,
Oh, yeah.
because you just gave us this huge resume, right? So everyone's just like hanging on, like, okay, we just went from the hippie stage and now we're here. So it's like, this is awesome. But I got to bring you back. I listened to one of your podcasts that you did I don't know when it was. It was some time ago, not too long ago. But you were talking about some of your cases. But here's what I want to try to find out from you. When you went into the criminal investigation division, prosecutor's office or the public defender's
Public
office?
defender.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. So you were like a caseworker more so. They were giving you cases to investigate before they brought them to a trial or
So, well, yeah. So a person gets arrested and they go to jail and then they get a court date. And then if they don't have any money, they get assigned a public defender.
mm-hmm.
So once they come into the public defender's office, typically, I mean, if it's just, it depends on the case, but you may or may not get an investigator assigned to work with your lawyer. So if the lawyer decided that there was an investigation to be done, witnesses to be interviewed, subpoenas to be served, what have you, then they would send over an investigation request, which would get assigned to any one of the investigators. So then I would take the case, and it may not be, the reasons for the investigation might be, of course, ultimately to prepare for a trial. So we want to find out what the witnesses are going to say. But way more often than the case going to trial, what happens is they take all the investigation reports over to the district attorney and they say, hey, these are what the witnesses are saying. You're way off here. You need to either dismiss this case, knock it way down. This guy's looking at 26 to life. You're not going to win at trial. Here's what your witnesses are going to say. So let's deal this down to a misdemeanor or something. So that's kind of what it's used for, negotiation. And then ultimately, somebody, if we call a witness at trial and they get up on the stand and they don't say the same thing they said to me, then I have to go to court and get up on the stand and tell the jury what they said to me when I interviewed them. So it's, a record of things to reflect on for consistencies and whatnot if we have to go back to the record in a trial.
Okay. You were not a lawyer?
No.
All right. Just wanted to.
No, it's more, so it's a law enforcement job.
Okay.
So that's why all the DA investigators all have a badge and a gun, because they're certified peace officers. But at the public defender's office, we're not actually peace officers because we're not going to arrest anybody. We're just there to help people get out of jail, basically. Or, we're there to maintain their rights. But it's
okay.
Not a lawyer job, but a peace officer, more law enforcement job.
Okay. Well, what could you say that you took from all of that, those number of years, that either did anything change your perspective about things, about way people are treated or how defendants are brought through a system? Anything that changed from what you thought at one time going in there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that experience was definitely fundamental to my development as a human being and to my opinions and outlook on life in general. So when you go to school for a criminal justice degree or administration of justice, whatever they call it, it's all law enforcement oriented. And all the teachers come from law enforcement or, their law backgrounds. But it's all basically for the most part, a law enforcement / prosecutor's point of view. And so when I got this job working for the public defender's office, it's briefly touched on, right? In criminal justice, you definitely go through your constitutional rights and, the cases, the Miranda case that made the Miranda warnings so, recognized / important, whatever. But the focus is on the prosecution, the handling of the criminals, the administration of the system, right? There's not like a lot of classes coming from the defense orientation. And so actually going out and working on cases, I definitely did get a sense of fairness of what's really going on, of what type of oppression is really out there, of the wealth inequality, of, just some people who just don't have a chance in life because their dad's in jail, their mom's in the other jail, and they were raised by foster care. And, a lot of times that goes bad.
Mm-hmm.
So, I learned early on that the police are not always 100% of the time truthful in their reporting of the situation. There's cases where police have gotten in big trouble from planting evidence, from, basically acting like gangsters, going around jacking people on the streets and stealing their drugs and then planting it on other people that they don't like. And that kind of stuff has gone on and been alleged by criminal defendants over the years. It's also been, found out in high profile cases where entire police departments got in a lot of trouble for corruption. So,
Interesting.
yeah, I think that the biggest point I could boil it down to is just the idea that you never really know what happened unless you were there witnessing it yourself. And even then, your perception is just from your own point of view. There's so many other points of view of the same thing. And so it really kind of got me to just be very open-minded about things, about people, about kind of, circumstances. And really, you just never know where somebody's coming from, what the truth actually is, because I learned that there actually are people who will make up stories and accuse other people of doing things to them that they didn't actually do. And, a lot of times in criminal cases, that's what it comes down to is he said, she said. And so,
well, it was interesting because the one word that you said, which is exactly what I was thinking, was the word witness, right? Because witness statements are huge in these type of cases, I would say, right? Wouldn't you agree with that? Because that's when you're able to collaborate a number of the same witnesses all saying the same thing, then you pretty much have a pretty good perspective on what's going on, right?
Right. You would never have a case that came to court unless there were witnesses.
Correct.
Because the one witness would be the victim who would be the complaining witness. So the prosecutor would never really have an opportunity to even wonder what you were up to if someone hadn't complained, witnessed a crime, called the police, and asked them to come arrest and prosecute. So, yeah, but that's the thing about witnesses. There's tons of problems with eyewitness testimony. How did you have your glasses on that day? How far away from the incident were you? Was the sun in your eyes?
That's funny. It reminds me of the movie My Cousin Vinny. I don't know if you remember that movie, right? What was all those things looking through that window with all those trees and all those things? What do you call those things? Leaves. Oh, okay.
Exactly. And then also too, like your memory, there's a lot of, I would go to conferences about eyewitness testimony, and it gets real deep in the psychology of how the memory works and the physiology of the hippocampus and where all these memory connections take place, and what type of brain damage does a person have that might interrupt those memory neurons from firing properly. And so there's all kinds of fascinating aspects to the idea of a witness to an incident, because there are so many things that affect your perception. So yeah, a lot of my job would be, coming back after the fact and maybe poking holes in the eyewitness testimony. I'd go back and talk to the witnesses and show them a lineup and see if they could pick the person out. Like, if somebody really did this horrible thing to you, like maybe 6 months later, you should probably still be able to pick them out of a lineup, or maybe you can't, or maybe you just saw a guy that looked like that the night he was arrested, and you're like, yeah, that's the guy that did that thing to me. But maybe it really wasn't him. So it's all about finding another perspective, an alternate explanation. What are the alternate explanations? Who maybe is the actual person who did this thing to you? And yeah, so it's all about perspective, and there's just so many different perspectives, and so much humanity out there to discover and be curious about. So oh, go ahead. Were you about to?
No, I was thinking about how many hours you were working on these cases, because you were salaried or getting paid through the prosecutor's office or through public defender's office.
Thousands and thousands of hours. And one of my most formative cases was a murder case between two homeless kids on the river. And so that actually took me down to the homeless encampments up and down the American River here. And now, 25 years later or so, it's gotten much, much worse. But even back then, we had a lot of homeless people living camping on the river. So I spent an entire summer down there interviewing kids who had been somewhat in some way or another involved. So it's not always whether you're a witness to the actual murder, but maybe you know the defendant, maybe you knew the victim. There's context to be added through talking to people about the background of this or that person. Either we're discrediting the victim or the complaining witness, like AKA maybe he had it coming, or we're going around talking to character witnesses about what a great guy the defendant was. But that case really showed me a side of humanity that I wasn't necessarily prepared for. And it gave me a whole education about suffering and misery and the human struggle that's going on out there in the world. And eventually the lawyer on that case and I started a legal clinic down at the homeless resource center, Loaves and Fishes. And there's now like a monument to this lawyer because he passed away some years ago. But we started the legal defense clinic because a lot of these folks that we were interviewing out there, the police would come through, they would sweep the people, take all their belongings, take their dog, throw their stuff away, put them in jail, give them a ticket. At least they would cite them for the camping. And then if they didn't show up in court, then they would issue a warrant and then they would go to jail. And it was just this cycle that just kept happening. And it wasn't helping anything. And it was taking a people that already have nothing and putting them through the ringer again, basically just for being poor and crazy. And maybe on drugs. This particular murder case, like there was all the evidence was there, which blew my mind at the time. I couldn't imagine that. How would homeless people get money for drugs and what are they doing out there? But they're out there even 25 years ago doing the meth, the drugs, and staying up all night, getting money somehow, stealing stuff off of porches. Who knows? But it definitely is going on. It's a factor. But whether it's, just mental health issues, drug addiction, trauma, it turns out that there's so many people traumatized by life that they can't cope and they just basically lose it and go live on the streets in a tent, and then they get traumatized and victimized more. So yeah, it's sometimes I feel like that Buddhist guy that walked out away from his comfortable abode where everything was lovely and luxurious, just out into the streets of suffering to experience humanity, kind of what I'm feeling, like a little esoteric,
That's a very true statement. I mean, because, well, there are some people who live in a bubble, right?
Right.
And that's their world, and they will not go outside of their bubble. You don't really see that every single day. Let's talk a little bit now. Was there a point that you wanted to make that you remember now, or we can move on?
Oh, I mean, you asked me how it fundamentally changed me or whatever. So I was just giving you that perspective on all of the ways that it opened my eyes to the world and kind of gave me a greater sense of compassion for humanity and a greater understanding of perspective and, just all of that. It was very, very life changing information to have coming at 21 years of age.
Right. So then you said that your mom was in real estate, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And so was she doing traditional real estate? What kind of real estate was she involved in?
Well, so she started off as an appraiser in the 80s, and then in the 90s she got a broker's license and went into residential real estate, working with first-time buyers. So while I was going to school, she was helping me with my rent while my kids were little, and I would do all of her mailers for her. So my job was to hand sign her name on the letter that welcomed everybody with bad credit to please call us and we will help you fix your credit and buy a house with zero down. So her niche was always zero down HUD homes and first time buyers. And she would just send you the yellow letter for years and years until you felt like she was your best friend. And then you would call her because you'd been getting her mailers for so long. So that was her long haul strategy. And it was a small family business. So my sister, my brother, and I helped with everything that we could help with. And my brother did like the repairs on the sales. My sister and I both got our license eventually. And at that time, there was no NMLS. There was the wild, wild west of loans. It had been regulated some after the savings and loans
Mm-hmm.
scandals and the disasters of the 80s,
Mm-hmm.
but
Dad
it was
Frank. Mm-hmm.
still pretty wild out there. We had those god awful pick a payment loans with the minimum payment option where you could actually negatively amortize and just add a portion of your principal and all the interest onto the back end of your loan. And that put a lot of people eventually in a position of being underwater, right? Because they were just like, this is great. I have this huge house. I don't have to pay 600 a month. Okay, yeah, but the other 1,200 is going on the back end every month. And now, as the market shifts and crashes and changes, you owe more on your house than it's worth. And everybody walked away from their house because they couldn't afford the payment in reality. So there were things like stated income loans where if you had a good enough credit score, the lender would trust you on how much you say you make. So you just state your income and then there's no income documents, no pay stubs, no bank
Mm-hmm.
statements, no W-2s, just your good credit score and your word that you make $20,000 a month as a manager at McDonald's or, however much. I mean, there were no questions asked. So while at the time it seemed great that we were getting people into homes with no, little to nothing down, little to no documentation. People who did have bad credit could still get a loan. It would just be uh, an ARM,
Mm-hmm.
it would be a subprime loan with less favorable terms, a 2-year fix instead of a 30-year fix, an 8% rate instead of a 5% rate. People were like, great, this is excellent. So, there were just loans going on that you would never see now. And so that was where I learned everything real estate related. We just taught ourselves. We figured it out as we went along. We built an office. Eventually there were probably 15 agents in the office, I guess, right before the crash happened. And then there was one, and my mother and her husband, my stepdad, they both are brokers, and so they pretty much ended up downsizing quite a bit after the subprime
Mm-hmm.
crash and
So then you get out of
kind of,
really, then you get out of the business at that time for a while, right?
yeah.
So all the reform was going on, right? So we had the Dodd-Frank Act that put all the safeguards in and all the retooling of the mortgage industry and writing loans and qualifying loans and all of that. What was significant that you decided that you wanted to get back into it? Was it just that the market was right for you to do that, that you thought that you can go back in and make money now? Because there were a lot of agents who left the industry in 2008. Some of them never really went back. Some of them just hung up their license, but there must have been something there that you felt that this is what you wanted to do.
um yes, I saw my mom was kind of struggling. She was getting older. She wanted some help. I wanted to help take over the family business. I wanted to get back into doing something that was, going to continue to be profitable. I saw that the market was coming back and I saw opportunities to market to my mom's database to get people, she had kind of gone into semi-retirement after the crash, actually, but she still had this huge book of business. And as I just thought about, I mean, I love the idea of being a goat farmer forever, but it's actually a lot of physical, hard labor. And I'm not built for digging holes and carrying 5-gallon buckets, it turns out. I needed something way easier than schmucking at hay bales. Have you ever lifted a hay bale?
No, I don't
Um,
think so. No. Mm-mm.
yeah, they're heavy. That's why them big old corn-fed farm boys can throw it on the back of your truck for you. So, uh, after doing that for a couple of years, I just started thinking, I have a friend in real estate. I mean, I have all kinds of friends in real estate, actually. And so one of them who was very inspirational, when I finally got on Facebook, I just saw that she was constantly posting, and she constantly had 11 in escrow. And I was just like, oh man, I want to go work with her. So I kind of chased my childhood friend down, and we did a bunch of business together until the rates kind of changed, and everybody in our little first time buyer bubble got priced out of the market because they were already squeaking by with first time buyer ratios. And when the rates doubled starting last April or so, I mean, they've been going up a lot for a year until now they're double what they were then. But they started going up a little before that, and then they really started going up drastically. So that market shift has really caused another shift in perspective. And I think a lot of people in real estate are aware that you need to have a spouse with a regular job or several streams of income coming in to get you through the times when the market is not favorable.
Mm-hmm.
In my area and a lot of areas, there's just no inventory because people aren't listing their house, because why would they? They're in there, everybody refinanced. So that was a great thing that happened during the pandemic, as a loan officer, is that everybody refinanced, and everybody has an interest rate of like 2.5% right now. And why would they list that house and sell it when they have to go out and get a mortgage with a 7% rate now?
Mm-hmm.
And the house, the Fed is trying to slow this thing, but the market is not, the prices are not coming down in time to meet the interest rate in the middle to where people can qualify. So a lot of investors are ending up with these houses that do go on the market, but a lot of sellers, unless they're relocating from an expensive place like California
Mm-hmm.
to a cheaper place like Texas or something, there's just not the inventory out there. So
yeah, that's an interesting point. The real estate industry is that people are moving. They were talking about California, and they're saying, well, people are leaving California or leaving New York. And so we see that here. So our market in the South, in the Charlotte market, we're in a demand market. And so we see people from California. So in response to, you're saying that why sell your home? Well, obviously it's either for a job relocation or they want to move somewhere better where property taxes are better. That is probably a big change that California is seeing. Are a lot of people leaving the state?
I mean, I have heard about this exodus that is taking place in the numbers, in the statistics. I think it has slowed down some. I really think that like the majority of the exodus took place during the pandemic, as far as people working remotely from anywhere that they wanted to be where they could pay less to live there. So I feel, and what I've seen is that it's slowed down significantly in the numbers, in the inventory available coming on the market. People are not leaving California in my area as great of numbers. I kind of feel like they're still trickling out because it is largely unaffordable here. The house that I bought for 100,000 when I bought my first house, with the rates the same. So today the rates are about the same as they were in 97 when I bought my house, my first house. Now that house sold for 117,000, and now it's worth 650. So now we have the same rate on a vastly different purchase price, and these people that make 60 or 80,000 a year can't afford a 600 or $700,000 house at the 7% rate. So I hear a lot of people on my social media groups talking about, rates were 16% in the 80s when they got into the industry. Well, sure, but 16% on your $75,000 house or your $30,000 house is much different than 16 or 7% on your $700,000 house, or
exactly. Yeah.
your $900,000 starter house in San Francisco, if you're lucky enough to find one.
Right. That's true, because I did a podcast with a gentleman that's a loan officer. We talked about what we call starter homes, right? And for college kids that are getting out with a lot of school debt, don't know what the average starter home is now. You said 900,000 California. I
Well,
think,
that's in, the Bay Area. There's
okay.
certainly cheaper areas, but in Sacramento, I'd say 350.
Hmm.
But where I'm looking in other parts of the country, you could get a starter house for 35,000 if you want to live in Kentucky in some places, for example. So, there are, I'm sure, different opportunities there, but I think that idea, when somebody sold their $700,000 house or their $900,000 house in San Francisco a couple years ago, maybe they did go and buy a house for 30,000 in Kentucky. And, this
Yeah, I mean, some just want to buy land now and just live off the land, or, we have all these tiny homes people are building, things like that. So let's talk a little
Yeah.
bit about, because you've seen, obviously, you've been in the real estate market a long time. You've seen all of that, the change with the 2008 and now all of the new changes today. Let me ask you now about, because you deal with a lot of first time home buyers, and maybe you can put the two together. But based on how you used to handle first time home buyers, say 15, 20 years ago to where you are now, are the challenges for first time home buyers still the same, or what do you see as more of a challenge today than it was, even before the meltdown of 2008?
Oh, it's for sure much more challenging now in terms of debt to income ratios. I mean, back then I had a lot of single clients, single women, single men buying a house, going to live their life fresh out of college, whatever, professionals. And now you need two incomes or three incomes. So, or a huge down payment. So, the down payment assistance, there is some out there still for people who don't have a huge down payment, because that's the struggle, right? How do you save a down payment when you're already struggling with bills and your rent and your everything to become a first time buyer? You need at least 3.5% down with an FHA loan, right? Or 3% down with a home possible loan. So there are ways to come in with a little bit down, and then there's down payment assistance. But just qualifying at the higher interest rate is huge. I mean, the payment is going to be 1,000 or 1,500 more on a $300,000 house, or $500,000 house, than it would have been a year ago at the rates that we had in the high, in the middle of the pandemic, or a year and a half ago when we were
Hmm.
at what 2%, 2.5,
Hmm.
2.75 all day long. Um,
But are
it's
there
the
more programs though now than there were before, other than, because isn't so Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, haven't they tried to open up more opportunities now for first time home buyers with
they do, they have, but they're not coughing up the money for these programs.
mhm.
So they're lessening and loosening the guidelines so that more people can qualify. But the funds come from nonprofits, Nehemiah, somebody that wants to promote first time home ownership. A state agency, like in my state, we have CalHEFA, which is the California Housing Finance Agency. And they have funds, but once the funds run out, that program's over.
Mhm.
So it's just a matter of funding the programs to get people the down payment assistance. HUD hasn't come out with 500. Well, I mean, HUD perhaps actually does have their own programs. You can get a USDA loan, a zero down, but like in the 2000s, what was different was that many, many people had defaulted on their loans. And so there were many, many HUD homes available. And HUD's just passing them out for zero down, 500 down all day long. So again, it's back to that inventory issue. And the issue is, 15 years ago, the house cost 200,000, and now the house costs 800,000 for the
Mhm.
same house. Or in Sacramento in the late 90s, my brother bought a house for 32,000 that I thought was so crazy that he sold it for 260 a few years later, because that's already almost 10 times increase. And now that same house that was 32,000 not that long ago is like 700,000. So that's the biggest thing is just how do you qualify for that? I mean, this is one generation removed because now my brother and I are in our 40s and our kids are in their, his kids are in his teens, mine are in their 20s and 30s. Uh, so they're in home buying age, but at our age, our house cost 32,000 and now at their age, that same house costs 700,000. So, you know, that's
Right. That's the
essentially
challenge.
that's
Right.
that's
Rising.
the challenge. That's the
Yeah.
math that's not working out. People are just deciding to rent. They don't have a down payment. They can't qualify, or they move out of California and go find someplace cheaper. So I do think they're still trickling out, but then once you start to trickle out to Kansas, for example, you need to have a job in Kansas. So the economy being, maybe Kansas, you don't have a job there. So how do you actually relocate? So I think people are kind of struggling, getting stuck in a way because the economy isn't moving that direction.
So do you think the government right now is playing sort of like you brought up Kansas. So are they playing sort of like a Wizard of Oz that what you're hearing is really not what's behind the curtain? And so let's just take this, for example, what's going to happen on May 1st with the credit score. If I'm wrong, tell me. But from what I understand, that if you're going to be purchasing or selling a property, I don't know if it's selling, but if you have a credit score of 680 or higher, then Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac is going to take a $40 a month or something from you for having that credit score. And then the question is like, where is that money going? And who's going to get it? And who's going to monitor it? Who's going to keep it transparent?
Okay, so what I believe there's a lot of misunderstanding going on around this change. It's a loan level pricing adjustment, which they refer to it as a LLPA. So for one thing, this LLPA came out some time ago, and Fannie and Freddie have been trying to figure out how to make it work in the pricing engines at the lenders so that the lenders know how to reflect the new loan level pricing adjustment. So what that means is a loan level pricing adjustment is the cost of your credit based on your credit score, essentially. So there's you get a hit for different for mortgage insurance, for loan to value, for credit score. And so this loan level pricing adjustment is in relation to the fee that you're paying to get that loan. So
You mean the
it's
lower
not,
fee?
huh?
You mean the lower fee, right? Because if you have a higher credit score, then your interest rate or your fees are less, right, than someone who is below.
Well, okay, so that's the change.
Okay.
So traditionally, the way this thing works is if you need at least maybe a 580 or 620, some lenders will go down to a 550. You need a minimum credit score. And then your price of that money is going to be dependent on your credit score. So if you have a 550 or versus a 720 credit score, you're going to pay a lot more for that loan traditionally if you have a 550 score. If you have a 720 score, you'll get a reward for your good credit, and your loan level pricing adjustment or the cost of your money and the cost of your rate is lower than somebody who has managed their credit less responsibly than yourself. So this is where the change is coming in. And I am not well versed on the absolute specifics because there is a certain calculation where they're coming in with, X number of points to your fees for your credit score. And I don't know exactly what those are. I think it's like a half a point, 3/4 of a point difference. It's like all on a sliding scale. And it is the cost. So they're charging you less of a fee now if you're a marginally credit borrower, and they're equaling that out with a higher fee for a better credit score. So this is how I'm understanding this is now the cost of your credit with a 720 score, you're not going to get a huge spiff for that credit score. You're going to get the lower credit score people are now getting more competitive pricing than the higher credit score people. So this is taking
Okay.
marginal first time buyers and giving them a break on the cost of their loan.
On the backs of those who have good credit scores of 680 or higher, because that's where it's coming from, right? So that's the way that I see it, and that's how I've understood it. And Let me ask you this question.
Uh,
But do you see that though? Because that's what they're doing. To me, it's more political than it is about real estate. This is part of an equity. It's about an equity issue. So if the government wanted to help first time home buyers or home buyers with low credit scores, why wouldn't they just give them a better opportunity to give them a better rate versus taking it from, let's just say like they've had a 720, 780 credit score. They get it home for the first time. And now either they're not going to get their right rate or there's going to be a fee charged against their mortgage every month. And that is going to help out someone behind them who has a less credit score. That's the way that many people in the public are seeing that. And so if they're going to take money from those that have, better scores or higher scores, then how is the government going to monitor where that money is going if it's going to be, applied properly to those that don't? Does that make sense?
I mean, don't get me started on how you're going to get the government to do anything. This is essentially a wealth redistribution
Mm-hmm.
plan. Okay. So the way that it gets regulated is that the lenders give you whatever rate is on their matrix based on whatever your credit score is. So, you just pay if you buy the rate. I mean, your rate's across the board. Your rate is not going to be outside of a certain scope. Okay. Let's say that you could buy it down as low as 5.5, or you could get it up as high as 7% based on how much you want to pay. So it's all how much you want to pay for the cost of your credit to either take a higher rate or buy your rate down and get it to a lower rate. And that's what the bank does with their matrix, is figure out how much money they're going to charge you for the rate that you pick on the loan that you apply for. So basically, I mean, that's the money is coming. Sure, I do see how it's coming in on the back end, because if you don't want to come in with $7,000 to buy your rate down a little bit, you're going to take a higher rate and your payment is going to be a little bit more than it would have been if you had a lower rate. So that's the way that, I mean, as far as I understand, where it's not like the government is charging you a mysterious fee that you're reaching in and paying out of your paycheck. I mean, you're paying it, but it's in your mortgage payment.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Right.
it's baked into the fees of your loan. So what the government's saying is that these fees are unfair, and poor people with bad credit shouldn't have to pay more for their first time home. Rich people with good credit have it easy enough and they can afford to pay for their loan. And we're going to give the poor people with bad credit a break on their fees. And we're going to let them have the same interest rate for not as much of a cost. So it's
They
all, I
so
mean,
they should
the
just
money is,
right. So they should just allow those that don't have a credit score to have a better rate, allow them to have a better rate, and let the government work that out. Then going after those that have a good rate and for whatever reasons. It's almost like this.
but the government doesn't give you the money. The government is the insurance carrier of this loan. I mean, this money isn't coming from the government. The money is coming from the company that you're borrowing the money from. So it's coming from Wells Fargo or Rocket Mortgage or wherever it's coming from. Rocket Mortgage isn't getting any money from the government, any money to subsidize these loans.
Mm-hmm.
The government is just telling these lenders, hey, the way you've been lending this money seems unfair to us in our current paradigm, the way the government is running. And we think that you need to stop charging these marginal borrowers so much, and you can stop giving the good credit borrowers such a good deal. So you're going to still get your money because it's your money that you're lending out, but you're going to charge these good credit borrowers a little bit more, and you're going to charge these bad credit borrowers a little bit less.
Okay. So and based
So
on your
that's
knowledge,
how
that's fine. Yeah. So that's I like that.
where the
Okay.
government is telling the lenders, this is how we think you need to equal this out.
Okay.
And so that's where Fannie and Freddie came in with the LLPA,
Mm-hmm.
and they said, this is how we're responding to the government saying that we are, well, I mean, they are government agencies. So we
Right.
are saying as the government that this is how we decided you need to even out this wealth inequality a little bit.
So these are going to
And
be
so
on
it's a guideline
conforming
change.
loans, right? These are also going to be on conforming loans,
Yes,
right?
those are
Okay.
conforming loans. Those are not FHA loans. So, I mean, a conforming loan and is within a certain loan limit. And I don't know how these would apply to like a jumbo loan.
Okay.
But as far as this is not a VA loan, this is not a government loan. This is not a FHA, USDA. In fact, FHA recently reduced their mortgage insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So that's making FHA loans a little bit more competitive, a little bit more attractive. They already have lower rates than conventional loans. But this is Fannie and Freddie regulating conventional lending, whether it's conforming loan limits or jumbo limits or whatever. These are conventional guidelines that are changing in terms of the loan level pricing adjustment.
Well, that's a good perspective.
And so that just,
yeah. That's a good perspective because there's a lot of misinformation out there.
It's not
the media.
I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could say the thing that's going on. But when you really just break it down in terms of Fannie and Freddie are the government agencies regulating this, this is a LLPA, a loan level pricing adjustment, which means that this is the cost of this loan and it's adjusted based on your credit score and your loan to value.
Okay.
So not really making money from anybody. It's just kind of giving back a little bit and breaking it down a little bit differently as far as the way that they're going to price the actual money that you're borrowing.
Okay. The issue is, and maybe you would agree or not agree with this, but I mean, we only have a few minutes left. But there's nothing you can do now because once home prices go up the way they are, it's hard to bring them back down again, right? Like even the example you talked about with your brother's house, there's no way you're going to be able to take a home that now with the demand that we had and home prices that are where they are, there's no one who's going to say, we got to bring home prices down 25, 30% so that those that can afford a home can buy them. So what do you see though? Let's just say this way, even though they've got this new program now, where do you see the industry or real estate right now? Do you have any tea leaf on it? Like, what do you think is what's happening in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I started wondering what was going to break when they brought the interest rates down to zero, because you can't just do that without something breaking eventually, right? So my only experience in that is what happened after 2008. And what we saw was that the entire economy crumbled and then it was propped up again, right? And so those houses, people didn't make their payments. People were forced out of their homes. There was massive increases in my area of homelessness, et cetera, where a lot of those houses at the top of the market back then, they did come down 50 to 75% in price. You know, some houses I saw that were worth 700 or 800. People I know scooped them up after, you know, in 2012, 11, 10 for 200,000. So, I mean, that's kind of the worst case scenario, right? The bottom just absolutely falls out. I mean, I'm still seeing houses in places for 32,000 in other areas. So, I mean, I think it's highly doubtful that that would happen in California because prices haven't really ever come back down to that low rate. And across the board, you know, it's kind of baked into like the inflation that they don't really tell you about. Like when, you know, this is not part of our inflation rate, but when I was a kid, my parents' house cost 75,000 and now that same house is worth 900,000. So that's a huge inflation of that value in my lifetime, where I can no longer afford that $900,000 house that I would have been able to afford just fine at 75,000. I mean, worst case scenario, the bottom falls out of everything because people will stop making their payment if they don't have a job. So as in a broad view, as AI takes over, as AI works people out of different aspects of their employment sector, as the future changes and investors buy up more of these houses that average people can't afford, and we all become renters and slaves to AI, you know, like that's what I see.
That's
as
interesting.
The ultimate,
I'm glad you.
There's a wide spectrum, terrifying things out there that could happen in the future, you know?
Right. Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you mentioned that because did you enjoy yourself here on the podcast here with me? What'd you say?
Definitely.
Would you come back again if I asked you to come back?
I'd love to. Yes.
Because I do want to talk to you some more. We have to wrap it up here. I do want to talk to you about the AI, and I love to have that conversation with you, and also explore a little bit more about how first-time home buyers, what advantages that they can do, or what may be important for them to start doing to get into a home. We can have those conversations in the next future podcast. What do you think about that?
I'd love it. Sounds like a plan.
And so if people out there that are listening right now, and all the people that we have on the platform, if they want to reach out to you in your area for loans or for anything in real estate, how do they contact you? Be you open to giving us your information?
Oh, yeah, sure. Anybody could call me anytime. I'm at 916-215-9811. Put that in your show notes, and they can reach me through my website at stefaniboyd.com. Or they could email me at sboyd@stefaniboyd.com.
Awesome. Stephanie, you've been a great guest. I really appreciate you. I'm glad that we got together and have this podcast, and this is great. And maybe, who knows, maybe something might come from this as far as, I love having someone to come on as a repeated guest and build on that. I think that's cool, and maybe this is what this is about. I'm not sure. Could be.
I'm open to all potential futures.
Okay.
Hit me up anytime.
There we go. All right, Planet One, man. It's the planet. This is what we're doing. So, appreciate you all being here. And Stephanie, appreciate you being here, being part of us, and being such a great guest, and having you back again in the very soon future. And for everyone out there,
I look forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you. Reach out to Stephanie. We'll have all of her information up on the platform for you. You can reach out to her directly for her website and for all of her contact information. And for me, you've got all my information. I have it up there as well. Planet One Podcast. We have our YouTube channel as well as our host company. We're on Spotify. We're even on Amazon Music, folks. That's right. And Pandora. Check it out. So for Greg Angello at Planet One, take care of one another. Be kind to one another. Love one another. Talk to you soon. Take care.